Sweeny, let's just start with the question that most Yankee fans are asking right now. Why?
Yeah, I don't know if we have the answer to that yet, Eamon. I think the idea was out there that after 10 years, of course, it's possible that the Yankees could go in a different direction. But the team made a big step forward this year, obviously just one win away from going to the World Series. And with a roster that was better equipped to compete than the last few years when the Yankees still finished over 500 with Girardi at the helm, it is a bit of a surprise to everybody.
Obviously, as you mentioned, this is a young roster that developed a lot faster than anyone really expected. And Joe Girardi does not come across as warm and fuzzy. The fans certainly did not have a great relationship with that Billy Martin, Joe Torre type. And now we're starting to hear that maybe the players didn't. You're around this team every day from spring training until the last out of the season. How would you describe the relationship between Joe Girardi and his players in that clubhouse?
Well, I mean, listen, the players have changed a lot over the years, so I think it's different to say it different ways. But I think they played for him. I think that much is obvious when you consider that the Yankees didn't have an under 500 record in any of his 10 years. And as I said, the last few years, he was handed an aging roster, and there were a lot of problems. And even before that, the Yankees had injury issues to deal with. Remember, you lose Mariano Rivera for an entire season. You lose Derek Jeter for an entire season. And the people that you're filling in around those rosters the last few years, a lot of them aren't even in the big leagues anymore. They're just, it's not a big league roster that he was handed and still managed to compete late into the season. This year, a different roster, and he was able to guide them through a number of issues. Of course, you had the gap in Game 2 in the division series in Cleveland, but the Yankees overcame that, and he was one win away from going to the World Series. So it adds to the shock value here when you consider how good a job he's done. As far as his relationship with the fans he touched on, let's just remember one thing. Joe Girardi's entire Yankees managing career has been spent in the Twitter era. No other Yankee manager had that kind of misfortune.
And certainly he lit up Twitter with his Game 2 decision and decisions, as you mentioned. And let's be honest, if Masahiro Tanaka does not pitch well in Game 3 against the Indians and they get swept, this is an entirely different answer. But now that the Joe Girardi era is over, how would you describe his legacy as a decade-long manager of the Yankees?
I think you have to remember that he took over a Yankee team that is in a lot of transition, and he was able to guide them to a World Series championship in 2009. You had a lot of star players. Obviously, you still had core four guys. You had A-Rod, you had Sabathia. You had a roster chock full of stars, Mark Teixeira. But as that roster aged, it became harder to get them to the next level. And let's be fair, too. It is really unfair to ask any Yankee manager now, either Girardi or the next one, to reel off 3 straight World Series championships or 4 out of 5 the way Joe Torre did. The playing field is a lot different now than it was then, financially across the game, and just the talent and the hurdles you have to overcome in order to get to a World Series, let alone win 1, 2, 3, or 4. So if the benchmark is going to be what Joe Torre accomplished, I think everybody is going to fall short of that. I think Joe Girardi had a successful run when you consider his over 500 record, winning a World Series, and just being able to compete at a high level every year.
All right, the first obvious question was why. The second most obvious question right now is who's next?
Great question. Internally, you have some candidates. I don't know how high they will be when you start looking outside the organization and trying to figure out. But if you're looking on the immediate coaching staff, Rob Thompson, Joe Espada, Tony Pena, all guys who either have managerial experience or have managerial aspirations. Al Padrique, to me, is a very interesting name because he's the AAA manager, and many of the star Yankee players have had him at various levels throughout their way up. Talking about Aaron Judge, Gary Sanchez, Greg Bird, Luis Severino, they all have had nothing but raves about Al Padrique and his job managing throughout. I wonder if the Yankees would take a chance and bring him up through AAA. If not, you have options outside the organization as well, and there are plenty of those.